Okay, we're going to get started with another set of measuring devices for financial statement analysis. We just finished taking a look at horizontal analysis, vertical analysis, and then the working capital ratio. So now we're going to take a look at liquidity. Remember, liquidity means how liquid am I, meaning how much cash do I have. Financial statement ratios simply refer to a relationship between two financial statement amounts, and we restate them as a percentage. Liquidity ratios assess the ability of a company to meet its immediate or short-term financial obligations. In other words, can we pay our bills? The four key liquidity ratios are: first, the current ratio, the acid test ratio, also known as the quick ratio, and two that you might remember by me mentioning them from Accounting 210, the inventory turnover ratio and the accounts receivable turnover ratio. So we're going to go ahead and go through each of the formulas for these particular ratios. You will also find in the back of your book on one of those stiff prep cards for Chapter 12 the key formulas and ratios that we'll be talking about and using. And this might be a handy cheat sheet for you to have when we start working with real numbers next Wednesday in class in your teams, when we really start to reinforce what we're going to learn here in these particular videos. So let's go ahead and move on to the current ratio, and let's discuss that. So the current ratio, also known as the working capital ratio, remember we did current assets minus current liabilities to get the dollars of working capital that are available, is a measure of an entity's liquidity, meaning how much cash do I have? What does this ratio really tell us? So in the current year, if we're looking at Robin's Boutique here, you can see that they had $6.38, roughly, we're rounding up, of current assets for every dollar of current liabilities. So man, that's pretty good. That's saying for every, and let's round up, we have $6.40 for every $1 of liability. So that means when I pay that liability, I'm going to have roughly $5.40 left over to go do other things with. So this on the surface looks like it's the right thing to do. In the previous year, Robin's Boutique had $7.09 for every dollar of current liability. And you're probably sitting here thinking, wow, high current ratios appear to be good. Especially if I'm a creditor of a company, I would want a high ratio, because that means if you pay me, you've got other money left over, and the likelihood of me getting paid on time is probably really good. But if you dig down a little deeper, a high ratio may also indicate that a company has too much cash, which we're always wondering, really, is there ever too much cash? But in a business there is. You always want your cash or is an asset always working for you. Accounts receivable, that's money people owe us, so we typically don't want that really high. We want that turning over all the time. And the same with inventory. We want just enough inventory, but not too much inventory where it starts to age and stays on the books a long time because we've tied up our cash. We want it to sell so we can turn that inventory into cash to pay for the inventory. Historically, we used to look at a current ratio of 2 was considered good, like a 2-to-1. Some banks even wanted 3-to-1. So basically meaning for every $3, for $1 of liabilities mean I would have $2 left over when I paid the liability. But many companies now strive to maintain current ratios that are closer to 1, kind of a 1-to-1 with a little leftover money. Internal managers look closely at the current ratio and its composition so they can better control the level of our current assets, receivables, inventory, and cash. So the formula to compute these is current assets, and you're going to see me abbreviate it, divided by current liabilities equals this ratio. Okay, let's go ahead and take ratio. So we said we had concern over the current ratio and that maybe it had some things in it that might basically inflate what that really is. So one way that we've come up with to reduce the concern over the composition of the current accounts when computing the current ratio is to use the quick ratio or acid test. The quick ratio is a stricter look of the company's ability to pay its current debts with highly liquid current assets. So what we do is in the quick ratio, we remove inventories. We remove them. And we remove prepaid assets. So prepaid insurance, prepaid rent, prepaid supplies, we remove all of those from our calculation. So therefore, when we take those out, you can see when we've done this here in Robin's Boutique, it lowered us in 2012 from $6.38 to $3.25. So it's closer to 1. Anytime your ratio is less than 1, that's a concern to not only the internal managers, but also the creditors, because that indicates that the liquid current assets are not sufficient to pay your bills. In layman's terms, it means your bills are more than the money you have to pay them with. Robin has unusually high ratios here, okay, and that isn't necessarily bad, but management should really have good reasons for holding this excess cash. Robin really should look at converting its excess cash into something that might get them higher returns. A money market, equipment, some sort of investment that may get us higher money. Okay? And so the acid test ratio is similar to what's above, but it's the current assets minus inventories and minus prepaids. That equals the quick asset. Okay? Which is, it is used, but maybe not as much, but it certainly helps us cover up some of the weaknesses. So remember, in the current ratio and the quick ratio, we felt there were at least 2 major weaknesses. The first is that all debt payments are made with cash, whereas current assets include non-cash assets, such as inventory, accounts receivable. The second is that both ratios focus on liquid and current assets at a point in time at the balance sheet. But we know that over the course of the year, cash will change, inventories will change, accounts receivable will change, as well as other current assets over that course of that year. For these reasons, the amount of cash flow from operations is sometimes used as the numerator in the ratio. And you would get this from the statement of cash flows, which we're going to be doing here in the next couple weeks. And you also take the current liabilities, but we take the average current liabilities. Remember, when we average these things, it's always going to be the beginning current liabilities plus the ending current liabilities divided by 2. The beginning current liabilities and the ending current liabilities divided by 2. Now you see that we look a little better, okay? We're close to 2, but we're above 1. And so this appears now that Robin is really actually generating sufficient cash from operation to pay their obligations. And so what we've done is we've started with the current ratio, okay? We kind of look at that, that's okay. But then we drill down, and then we drill down even farther to see if they really are weaknesses or what the number really is. So next we're going to take a look at, hopefully we'll come back to your memory, and that's the accounts receivable turnover ratio. I think it's one of the best measures of efficiency in the company's collection process. Management's analysis of accounts receivable is very important in monitoring collection and even granting credit to companies. So in this particular calculation, it says that Robin's Boutique sold on account and subsequently collected accounts receivable almost 6 times during the year. That is very favorable. And how did we get that calculation? We took net credit sales, and then we took the average accounts receivable, which is beginning AR plus ending AR divided by 2. And we get that almost 6 times a year they fully collect their accounts receivable. That is extremely positive. The higher this number, the better you're off. The lower this number gets, you have to question that and enact activities that help bring that number up. Once we've calculated this accounts receivable turnover ratio, in this case the 5.6, and take a look at the number of days it takes for us to convert our accounts receivable. And so here we do this by taking 365 days divided by the accounts receivable ratio, which gives us 65.8 days. So what this ratio tells us is that the average time to collect sales on account was 63.15 days in the previous year, and in the current year it's 65.18 days. So almost 2 days longer is it taking us, still rather okay, but it's taking us to collect our receivables. So you say, is this amount of time to collect the sales acceptable? Well, we really don't know unless we examine the company's particular credit policy or the industry standards. If the accounts are due in 30 days, this collection period of more than 60 days is not good. It means that it's taking twice as long to collect it, which means you still need to have cash to run your business. So you've either gone out and borrowed money, or you put your own money in, or you're paying your own bills late. HP's policy is 45 days, and most company wants HP to pay in 45 days. And I know that there's always criticism that we pay kind of late. So companies are always going to stretch their cash and their use of their cash vary as long as they possibly can. And so you need to be prepared for that. Some large retailers have collection periods of less than 1 week, which I think is really crazy. Look at another one that should start to be familiar to you, and that is the inventory turnover ratio. This ratio tells us that on average, that Robin's Boutique bought inventory and then subsequently sold it 2 times in the prior year and 2.27 times in the current year. We determine whether this inventory, if these inventory turns are good, is totally dependent on the industry and the company's standards. How do we make this calculation? We take the cost of goods sold by the average inventory. Again, that's beginning inventory plus ending inventory divided by 2. Now, just like the accounts, we're going to go ahead and take a look at how many days are we holding the inventory. On average, Robin is holding inventory for more than 150 days in both the years. Low turnover ratios and a corresponding high number of days in which inventory is held for sale can direct management's attention to a variety of problems, including inventory that may be obsolete. So if you look at this, it's taking what, about 1/3 of the year to sell her boutique inventory? Oh my God, there's more than those seasons. Don't we have summer, winter, spring, fall, holiday, special, okay? So this is really taking her a long time to sell her inventory. I would look at this and analyze it and say, do I have the right inventory? Do I have the right sizes? Okay, maybe we're left with some sizes. It really should direct the business to start to look at what they're doing by these particular metrics or ratios. The cash to cash operating cycle, and what we do with this is we take the cash to cash operating cycle ratio is the number of days of inventory. So we got that, 160.79, plus the number of days in receivables, is telling us, guys, how many days it's taking us to get cash. In other words, to turn the inventory into cash and the accounts receivable into cash. That's more than half a year it's taking me to take that money that I've spent or that's due to me and get it to cash. I would be very concerned with that if I was Robin. Now let's go ahead and tuck that under your belts, and let's go ahead and take a look at the profitability ratios in the next set of slides.